Welcome back to Movies You Missed, everybody. It's October. We're here doing some horror films. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. Hopefully you enjoyed our first horror movie episode with What Lies Beneath and Hereditary. We're going to dive into some pretty intense flicks today. I'm looking forward to it. How are you doing today, Vee?
I'm doing great, John, and yes, these are very intense, more on the psychological side of the horror genre.
Yes, indeed. And if you guys are new to Movies You Missed podcast, welcome. This podcast is a recommendation podcast. We are two entertainment industry veterans. We have collectively between us at least 25 years as crazy people in the entertainment industry. This podcast is also full of opinions, and we like to break down the films and give you guys a little bit of trivia behind the scenes as to what kind of went on back and forth with actors and directors and writers and producers. So welcome to Movies You Missed. This is episode 26. And Vee, I believe you kick us off with the mind bender of the day.
I do, and one thing about our podcast is there are no spoilers.
No spoilers. I did neglect to say that. Thank you, Vee. That is true.
And more so than other genres, as we've discussed previously, horror is the genre that really, really suffers if you spoil the movie to a point where it's almost worthless to see the movie if someone spoils it for you. So we certainly don't want to do that.
No, we do not. We really would love everybody to enjoy horror movies on their own. I know Vee is not majorly into horror, although I am. I've got a collection of close to about 100 horror films in my repertoire, and I've been going through them in between watching the movies that we have selected for the month of October, and boy, have I been having a blast.
I'm glad, because I've been having nightmares.
That's too bad. I don't think any of these films are really nightmare-inducing, but it's possible that the final pick of the month from me might cause you a little bit of anxiety.
Yes, this week's movie wasn't too bad in terms of long-term trauma that I'm going to have, unlike Hereditary, which I'm certainly scarred for life from. But at least with Hereditary, I was able to watch it with somebody else, where with The Lighthouse, I had to watch it by myself. And so, yeah.
I've only ever watched The Lighthouse by myself. I have actually never watched it with anybody. I never got to see it in theaters. And I remember watching it at home for the first time, and my wife was walking around behind me, kind of eavesdropping and checking out the screen. And when it ended, she said, "How was your stupid movie?" So I know how she felt about it.
Well, I wouldn't go that far about it. I did.
Neither would I.
Find it good. Just, yeah, we'll get into it.
We will. But yeah, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. I think we should jump into yours, though.
Yes, agreed. I do go first. You're right. And so I'm going to kick us off with the 2010 Martin Scorsese directed, Leonardo DiCaprio led Shutter Island.
Ooh.
One of my favorite outings of these two. They, of course, together make fantastic movies. I am very excited about their upcoming miniseries, The Devil in the White City.
Oh, it's a miniseries? I thought it was a film.
I was just reading, I thought so too, and then I was just reading that it's now a miniseries on Hulu.
Interesting.
Well, he has worked with streaming services before with doing The Irishman for Netflix, so...
Right.
I do think, given I've read the book, I do think a miniseries would probably be a better format for telling the story, because it is complex and does span over multiple years.
I don't know anything about this story, so I'm a bit in the dark about it.
Oh, okay. So it is the story of H.H. Holmes, who is one of the original serial killers that has been noted in the United States, and it happens during the World's Fair in Chicago. And so there's these parallel stories of the World's Fair and H.H. Holmes murdering all these people and basically building a murder house.
Oh, yeah.
But the interesting thing is that I read the book, and I really like the writer of the book in his other outings, but I did not like this one. I found it very boring and dry, and I'm like, how do you make a story about a serial killer boring and dry?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's too bad.
It was too bad, and my sister, who's really into true crime as well, said the same thing. She's like, wow, I did not like that book at all. And I was like, okay, good, thank you. I thought I was the only one.
Interesting.
But it is an interesting story, and so... Yeah. Scorsese and Leonardo being the ones making this miniseries now, I'm actually really excited to see what they do with this story, and it could be one of those few instances where I like the quote-unquote movie more than the book.
Right.
But it's just in pre-production, so it's going to be a minute.
Oh, yeah.
But we are not talking about Leonardo DiCaprio's and Martin Scorsese's future work together. We are talking about their work that came out in 2010. And so Shutter Island opens up with two men on a boat in what looks like very cold waters. It is dark, it is overcast, it is foggy. It definitely looks very damp and just kind of miserable. And that's also a good descriptor of the rest of the movie's setting as well.
Very.
And we find out very quickly that these two men, played by Leonardo DiCaprio and Mark Ruffalo, are U.S. Marshals. They are new partners. They are on their way to a mental asylum on a place called Shutter Island. Now, the reason they've been called there is that there is a missing patient, Rachel Solando. She has gone missing from the asylum. She is now somewhere on the island, they believe, because this is an island kind of like Alcatraz. You can't really escape it.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And the reason why Teddy, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, is so interested in this case and took this case is that he believes a criminal named Andrew Latis is hiding out on this island. And this is a bit of a personal vendetta for him because Andrew Latis is a man who's an arson and set a fire which killed Teddy's wife, played by Michelle Williams.
I actually forgot that Michelle Williams was in this movie. I think I told you just recently, this was like the third or fourth time I've ever seen Shutter Island. And I've always been hit or miss with Michelle Williams, but this time around, she hit real good.
Oh, yeah. So this is really a personal vendetta for Teddy. And when they get to the island, him and his partner, Chuck, played by Mark Ruffalo, you'd think that this would be a pretty straightforward missing patient case. But they very quickly meet a lot of resistance on this island from the people who work there, including the lead psychiatrists. And all of a sudden, Teddy is just facing more and more challenges on this case, which is complicated by his PTSD from World War II. We keep seeing flashbacks of his experience in World War II, including concentration camps. And then there are flashbacks of his wife to really give a backstory about his relationship. And he starts to really struggle. And this movie follows him trying to find this missing patient while struggling with his own inner demons while being surrounded by a bunch of disturbed people.
Yeah, my gosh, it really is a trifecta of fuckery, I guess is what we could say. Especially when nobody wants to even help him out. And when in a movie like this, my worst thing, it's even in the trailer, John Carroll Lynch, one of the most famous character actors, if nobody knows him by name, if you saw his picture, you'd be like, oh my gosh, he's in this and this and this and this and this and this. He is the one that has them surrender their firearms, like right as they get off the boat in Shutter Island. And you're like, oh, fuck, no, don't do it. And then, of course, they do it, and then that's, they've got them. It's like that's the moment where they've submitted to the will of the island.
In asylums, especially old-timey asylums, have always creeped me out more than almost any other thing.
They are fucked up looking.
The type of abuse and horrific treatment that went on them, the history of asylums really disturbs me. Plus, the thing that scares me the most, which is why I think 28 Days Later will be one of the harder movies for me to watch this month, is irrational mobs of people.
Ooh, yeah.
People that you cannot reason with.
Mm-hmm. As much comfort as you feel with Dr. John Coley as you see him on screen because of who plays him, it's one of those things where after about 10 minutes, you're really starting to get worried for everybody. Yes,
this whole island just seems like something's wrong with it. And Dr. John Coley is played by Ben Kingsley, who we've spoken about several times before in this show.
Mm-hmm. He was in one of your earlier picks.
Yes, he was in Lucky Number 11. He was also in Dave.
Oh my gosh, that's right. He was in Dave. That's right, yeah. Wow, that's interesting that a lot of the actors that we have a lot of the movies that we've chosen, there's a lot of actors that are in them that we've already discussed or are going to discuss. That's pretty cool.
Yes, there have been a lot of faces who pop back up, and I'm wondering if that is because they have a ton of credits, because none of these people are starring in these movies. They are supporting characters and actors in these movies, and so it's not intentional. But I have noticed that as well.
Yeah.
But they're great.
Definitely
so
who
cares?
Yeah, and it's definitely not been like an intentional thing where we're like, oh, they're in that movie, let's do it this way. It just coincidentally has worked out that way.
Similar to my picks of Robert Zemeckis movies, which have been entirely accidental. And everything adds to the creepiness in this movie. Like I said, the weather, the setting, the scenery. There are very jagged cliffs. This is outside of Boston, and so this is a New England setting that is, even though it's on the ocean, it's on an island, it is not warm, it is not comforting, it is not welcoming.
Not at all, no. You definitely feel like wrapping yourself up in a blanket after like the first 10 minutes of this movie.
Yes.
For comfort and peace of mind also.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I'm at home and I'm safe, but nobody else is.
Yes, this is one of Martin Scorsese's creepier movies that I've ever seen.
Absolutely. I've actually never seen Bringing Out the Dead with Nicolas Cage. I hear that one's pretty creeptastic, but that one's from the 90s. I should check that one out.
Yeah.
But Fear, he did. Oh no, Cape Fear.
Cape Fear.
Oh, that is fucked up.
One of my favorite Robert De Niro performances.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I loved
wow.
him in that movie. I thought
Cape Fear was nuts.
It was out of his comfort zone, and this was back before he did a whole string of mobster movies. When
Right.
Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, Cape Fear, he played a lot of different types of characters, and I thought he did great in every one. He does have a lot of range, similar to what we talked about in Stardust.
Very true. Yes, that's right. He can do comedy.
Yes, he can. I think he can be hysterical. I mean, look at Analyze This.
Yeah, Analyze This is a great one. Yeah.
So that's the gist of Shutter Island without spoiling it. There are 2 U.S. Marshals, played by Leonardo DiCaprio and Mark Ruffalo, who travel to an island that has a mental asylum on it, looking for an escaped patient and a criminal. And they just started learning the secrets of the island and the background of Leonardo DiCaprio. And a lot of the island is controlled and run by this Dr. Crawley, played by Ben Kingsley. And things just start to unfold, and as the viewer, you learn as you go. And this is certainly a creepy, entertaining ride.
Oh, very much so, yeah. I watched it very early on in the day last week when I put it on. I think it was about 9 in the morning. I was still, waking up a little bit, and after about an hour, I had to go get some water, so I paused it, and I was like, Jesus, I'm already an hour into this? It literally felt like I was only watching it for about 20 minutes. Like, it moves along very well. The pacing is fantastic.
Yes, that's a great call out. This movie certainly grabs you and keeps your attention.
And it does, and it kind of helps that the cast is truly great in just about every scene. It's not like anybody really, was half-assing anything. And, with Thelma Schoonmaker coming in as Martin Scorsese's editor, she really does keep the pace. The editing is fucking wonderful. And especially the scene where it's Teddy, Chuck, and Dr. John in Dr. John's office. And then later on, after they're done with it, he goes, cigars and drinks at my house if you care to join. And then, of course, it's like, well, wait a minute, what? Well, I guess, yeah, sure, well, fuck it, let's go have some. And then they meet Max von Sydow's character, who, I gotta say, I forgot that he was in this movie. And then as the camera's panning around, I'm like, oh shit, hell yeah, I forgot about him.
Absolutely.
And rest in peace, Max von Sydow.
Yes, who passed away last year? 2 years ago.
Oh, 2020, died 2 years ago.
Okay.
He was 90. So that's fucking nuts. He was like 40 when he did The Exorcist and was a young man. So the makeup that they had on him in The Exorcist was so good.
And you're right, this does have a fantastic cast, which is something I think I'm becoming known for with any of our returning listeners. So, of course, we start off with Leonardo DiCaprio. We've mentioned him several times before in this podcast. You discussed him in episode 4 with Romeo and Juliet.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my favorite roles of his are Django Unchained, which he should have won the supporting Oscar for. Inception.
Yes.
The Departed, another Martin Scorsese film.
Excellent.
What's Eating Gilbert Grape, which he certainly should have won an Oscar for.
Oh, agreed.
And then, as I mentioned, Romeo and Juliet.
Mm-hmm. My favorite Leonardo DiCaprio is still The Aviator.
He did such a great job. Yes.
Yeah.
Again,
epic film.
I think he probably deserved the Oscar for that role, too.
Oh, several times over, Leonardo DiCaprio should have walked away with one. Same with Scorsese. Scorsese got The Departed win. It's like, Departed's good, but
of all movies he's ever made, that is the one we finally decided to give him an Oscar for. Yeah, exactly.
Fucking Academy.
Well, similar to Russell Crowe getting it for Gladiator instead of The Insider.
Right. Yeah, and he was nominated for A Beautiful Mind, which I thought he was going to win for, but he did not.
But more deserved, yes. But of course, we could spend episodes talking about Oscar winners / nominees. So instead, I'll say Mark Ruffalo really holds his own in a sea of Oscar winners.
Yeah, Ruffalo was good in Shutter Island. I liked him a lot. I've always kind of been on the fence with him. I love him in Collateral. I think he's great in Collateral with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx. I really like him in this movie, and I've seen him in several other movies where I've been like, yeah, he's all right. Nothing to really write home about in my opinion personally, but I really liked him in Shutter Island.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you that he doesn't, disappear into a role as maybe some other high caliber actors, but he doesn't distract from anybody either. I do think he's a very good supporting character in a lot of movies that he's been in, including Now You See Me, which I had a lot of fun with that movie. I know a lot of people don't like it. They think it's kind of stupid, but I had a lot of fun with that movie at least.
I remember seeing that one time, and I was on the masses of that one kind of being like, meh.
Yeah, I get it. He, of course, is in the MCU as Bruce Banner or the Incredible Hulk.
He is?
He's in the entire MCU.
Yeah, I know. I'm kidding. He really disappears into that green role. No, you don't have to use any of that.
No, I'm totally using that. Okay. I'm absolutely using that. And then for some more serious turns, he is great in Foxcatcher.
I gotta see that.
Oh God, yeah.
I have actually.
Steve Carell,
that's
dude,
one. Yeah, that's one of those films that I've literally been like, oh, I gotta watch that because I have become a very big Channing Tatum fan over the last few years, and the fact that that's a serious role, and he's been doing mostly comedy, I really got to check him out in Foxcatcher. And I know everybody except for Channing Tatum, I think, was nominated for that one.
And rightly so, but Channing Tatum did a great job too. I was a bit disappointed that he wasn't given some sort of recognition for that.
I'm adding that to my watch list.
Nice. And then, of course, Zodiac.
Oh, God, I fucking love Zodiac.
That's so funny. So many people do, and I walked away from that movie going, I don't understand.
It is a very slow burn of a 2.5-hour movie. It could have had a little bit higher pacing on it, but at the same time, I think the pacing worked because it's about an investigation, and investigations are not quick.
True.
And I have read a lot of the actual book that it's based on, and I mean, it's one of the most accurate films that's ever come out, like down to the light bulbs in the scenes, like the cups that they use, the dialogue and the costumes and the hairstyles and the cars. Everything is almost exactly on point with accuracy. And I think Jake Gyllenhaal's great in it too. I think it's a really damn good film.
Speaking of somebody who deserves an Oscar, Jesus Christ, Jake Gyllenhaal is really fantastic.
I used to hate him so much, only because I hated Donnie Darko. But I became a big Jake Gyllenhaal fan after Source Code. And then after Source Code, Nightcrawler came out, and god damn, what a fucking movie Nightcrawler is.
Yes, I became a huge fan of his after Prisoners.
Oh yeah, Prisoners is damn good too. Hugh Jackman, him. Oh yeah, that's a good one.
And my favorite Mark Ruffalo movie is still 13 Going on 30.
Oh yeah, with Jennifer Garner.
That's a sweet film.
What color's your tongue?
Razzle red.
13 going on 30, that's right. 30, flirty, and whatever. What does she say? Like
I always
she's like hypnotizing
that.
herself. 30, 30, flirty, and thriving, or something like that, right? I think is what it is.
Yes.
And Andy Serkis is in that movie too, and he plays her boss. So I'm like, 13 going on 30 is a fun one.
And Judy Greer, who we've discussed before.
Oh yeah, Judy Greer, she's a good time.
Classic best friend.
Yep. Love her in Arrested Development. Last time you're gonna see these.
And love Ben Kingsley, as we've discussed. We talked about him in Lucky Number 11 episode, and also when we discussed Dave. And we've mentioned a couple movies that he's been in previously, including Schindler's List and Iron Man 3.
He's in Iron Man 3?
Yeah, he's the not the Mandalorian. He's the Mandarin, the bad guy in that movie. Which that movie sucked.
I don't even recall.
It's because it's a bad movie.
Okay, well, there you go.
One of my least favorite movies of the MCU.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Max von Sydow.
Oh yeah.
Of course, jumping onto the scene as the priest in The Exorcist, did such a great job in that movie. My favorite of his is Minority Report.
Oh yeah,
he's great in that film.
So, Minority Report it's just about a flawless fucking movie.
I agree. I love that. I absolutely love that movie. And Max von Sydow is Tom Cruise's boss in that movie and mentor.
That's right.
He's also in a couple of cult classics. He's in Flash Gordon.
Never saw it.
Me either. He's in
Flash.
He's in Conan the Barbarian with Arnold.
Never saw that one either.
Oh, I have. It's fun.
Really?
Can't be fun. Yeah. Yep. Dune.
I've never seen the original Dune. Or is he in the new Dune?
No, original.
Okay,
Yeah.
I haven't seen the original Dune.
He's
the
in
David Lynch.
Judge Dredd with Sylvester.
Oh, the OG.
He's the OG Judge.
I haven't
and
seen
Judge
that
Dredd.
one either.
You've never seen
terrible.
Judge Dredd?
No,
You
I've
need
seen
to see
Dredd
more.
with Carl Urban, but I have not
No.
seen Judge Dredd.
You need to watch more cult classics, buddy. I bet it's because you didn't have older siblings to introduce you to these movies in the 80s.
It's possible. Yeah. I was an 85 baby, and I never really did watch a lot of the cult movies back then, and also I probably was not allowed to as a child either.
True.
To see some of them, especially Judge Dredd, I can't imagine, or like RoboCop. I can't imagine my parents being like, "John, let's sit down and watch these movies," because I just saw RoboCop for the first time like a year ago, and I actually liked it. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, it's a great 80s sci-fi movie, that's for sure.
Definitely.
He's also in one of my favorite Robin Williams movies, What Dreams May Come.
Is he seriously?
He's the guide for Robin Williams in What Dreams May Come.
I thought that was Cuba Gooding Jr.
No, he's like the tracker that they hire.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. That movie, that is a wild ass flick.
It is. It absolutely is.
That is a nuts movie, and I remember I actually watched it right around the time that Robin Williams passed away, and that was a strange experience.
I bet.
Yeah.
I haven't
very,
seen
very
it
strange
since he
experience.
died, so.
I cried my eyes out when I watched it.
I cry every time.
It was
hard sobbing cries every time I watch that
it's
movie.
so heavy. My gosh.
It's intense. Yeah,
I remember it was marketed as like this, colorful movie. Not even close.
It is,
not even.
But
oh yeah, no, it's colorful, but it's not fun colorful.
No. And a couple of other people in this movie. Michelle Williams plays Leonardo DiCaprio's wife.
Mm-hmm.
She's in one of your all-time favorite movies, Manchester by the Sea.
No, most definitely.
For any of our new listeners, John hates that film with a passion. Hates it.
Waste of 2.5 hours.
She's Tom Hardy's ex in Venom.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And the movie that I most recognize Michelle Williams from is Brokeback Mountain. She plays Heath Ledger's wife in that movie.
I never saw Brokeback Mountain.
Oh, it's an incredible story. It's beautiful.
I heard it's good.
It's very good. And also, God, the scenery is gorgeous too.
It's been on my to-watch list. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it. And the last two people I want to talk about, they're just bit parts in this movie, but I do love them. Patricia Clarkson.
Oh, yeah. She is always good.
I love her in Easy A and the original Jumanji. She plays Robin Williams' mom when they show him being young.
She does? Mm-hmm. Wow, I don't recall that at all.
Well, her part is very, very small compared to his father, who's very domineering.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's in the original Jumanji with Robin Williams, which is cool. And then Ted Levine, who he has in recent years played a general or a cop, so he's Paul Walker's boss in the original Fast and Furious movie.
That's right. That's right.
He's the general in the movie Evolution that we mentioned a couple episodes ago with David Duchovny.
Oh my gosh.
He's the captain in Monk.
Yep. No, and he also has his famous mustache in Monk.
He does. But I will always and forever remember him as Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs.
Absolutely.
I love the typecasting change that he has done in the last 20 years.
He has had some range. Let's not lie about that.
Yes.
And I most recognize him absolutely from Silence of the Lambs, but he is also in the remake of The Hills Have Eyes, and he plays the father. And oh man, they do him dirty in that movie.
I'm going to surprise you by saying I've never seen it.
I had no idea.
No surprises here.
That one is a horror movie that when I first saw it, I was so horrified and disturbed by what I was seeing that I never wanted it in my house. And then a buddy of mine, within like the last 3 years, came over to my place with a box, and he's like, here's a bunch of Blu-rays I'm getting rid of, and it was the double pack of Hills Have Eyes and the Hills Have Eyes 2. and I haven't watched it yet. So I've only seen it like one time. The remake is brutal.
I mean, coming from you, I am certainly going to take that as gospel, given how much you love horror movies. Like, if you say it's disturbing and scary, like, I don't ever want to see it.
Yeah, there's maybe 3 or 4 horror movies that I've seen in my life that I never wanted in my house and that I never want to see again, and that was one of them. And the other one was this French film called Martyrs that I wish I had never seen. It was so horrifyingly fucked up. But the images are in there. They're in there somewhere if I ever want to pull them out again.
Yeah, I wish we had a delete button on our brains.
I wish we could Eternal Sunshine some movies out of our brains. Definitely. La La Land, Manchester by the Sea, Nomadland, Jurassic World. Shutter Island. No, I'm kidding. I like Shutter Island.
Yes, you do like it. And as I mentioned, Martin Scorsese directed this movie. Some of my favorite pairings with him and Leo are The Departed and The Aviator. I do not like Gangs of New York.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that. You weren't a big fan of the accents and stuff.
Yeah, and I just didn't like the story at all.
I liked that one, actually. It's not one that I would own and like watch all the time, but I was glad that I watched it.
And some of his other movies that I really enjoy are Casino, Cape Fear that we talked about,
Yep.
Goodfellas, and Raging Bull.
Oh yeah, Raging Bull is great.
Now, Dennis Lehane wrote this book.
Oh, it is based off of a novel.
It is.
Oh, okay.
He's written some fantastic, dark books that have been turned into movies.
Really?
Mystic River.
Ooh.
And, which you haven't seen and that you need to, Gone Baby Gone.
Oh yeah, I have not seen that, but I have seen Mystic River.
So for our listeners, if you've ever seen either of those movies and enjoyed them, definitely give Shutter Island a chance. It's definitely along the same tone, the same vein. Very, very good. And though this is based off a book, the screenwriter for this movie is Leda Kalogridis, and she was the writer of your second pick ever on this show, Alita, which is
Indeed,
cool.
she was.
She came back around. She doesn't have a huge filmography, but she has done well. She also wrote Altered Carbon, the Netflix miniseries that is also based on a book that is very good.
I hear that's good. I haven't watched any of that yet.
She also wrote Terminator Genesis, which isn't a great movie, but it is not terrible.
It's not terrible.
No, it's not.
I actually think I prefer it over Dark Fate in a strange way.
100%. Even though Linda Hamilton comes back, Genesis is a much better film. I
agree.
She also wrote Alexander, one of the movies that you like that I think is trash.
I have not watched Alexander, and I'm going to be honest with you. Gosh, it's got to be at least 15 years. I have the director's cut that's like 3 hours plus long, and I need to rewatch it again to see if it even remotely holds up in my mind. It's got Val Kilmer in it, though.
I know. I love Val Kilmer, but no, it's terrible.
Okay.
Watch Thunderheart with Val Kilmer in it instead. It's better. And you haven't seen that yet.
No, I have not.
But Martin Scorsese was not the only director ever considered for this film that was in development for quite a while. David Fincher was considered.
Ooh, interesting.
Which could have been interesting. I think, similar tone, again, kind of creepy. Yeah. I could see the story being told in a creepy way with David Fincher attached.
I could too.
My favorite movie of his will always be Seven.
Yeah, Seven is a masterpiece.
Wolfgang Peterson was also attached to direct this film.
Interesting.
Which would not have been... I do too, but that would not have been the same movie.
No, I don't think it would have. I think it would have been... Well, I don't know what it would have been. We don't know. Pseudo-universe combo again. But yeah, that's fascinating.
It would have been...
His filmography is great.
Oh, it is. But it would have been much more action-driven, much more of a blockbuster. They would have had to make tons of changes. And unfortunately, Wolfgang just passed away in August of this year.
He did?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh, wow. I had no idea. That's
a bummer. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it is.
So he directed, just for his honor, I guess I want to talk about a couple of his movies. So he directed Troy, Air Force One, which we both love, Outbreak, a Clint Eastwood movie called In the Line of Fire. Rene Russo's in that movie too. I like it. John Malkovich actually is the bad guy in that movie. I think you like it.
Oh, nice.
He also directed The Neverending Story.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So Wolfgang was great. Fan of him as a director. Not necessarily for this story. I do prefer David Fincher-esque or the Martin Scorsese version is great. But it is interesting that there were a couple other directors considered for this movie. So similar to actors and actresses who are considered for roles, they do go through a process with getting the right director too.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I always thought that since DiCaprio was attached as lead, it was immediately going to go to Scorsese.
Right, I know. And before choosing Mark Ruffalo, Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese both considered Robert Downey Jr. or Josh Brolin for that role.
Ooh.
Josh Brolin, I think, could have been interesting.
I would have liked to see some Brolin.
Yeah,
definitely.
I like Josh Brolin a lot. And
that's interesting that both of them are in the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
All three of them
are also in the MCU, yeah.
Yeah, and this was 2010, so I wonder if Mark Ruffalo was the Hulk yet. Probably not.
No,
right?
I don't think so.
It was Edward Norton?
Because he was the Hulk in 2012's The Avengers, and that was his first appearance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah, because Edward Norton was not asked back.
No, that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
And this was actually the highest grossing film of Martin Scorsese's career until The Wolf of Wall Street 3 years later.
Wow.
This movie had an $80 million budget.
Oh, man.
There were some heavy hitters in it. That kind of makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
And
definitely.
The U.S. box office was $128 million. The worldwide gross was almost $295 million. So it did very well. And
Yeah,
so it makes sense that it was the highest grossing movie of Martin Scorsese's career until The Wolf of Wall Street. Again, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Indeed.
And it is the only movie partnership between the two men, Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio, that failed to receive any Oscar nominations, and that really pisses me off.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because I do think several actors in this movie did Oscar-worthy performances, especially Leo. I mean, at least for a nomination. Maybe they didn't have to win that year. I don't remember who was nominated in 2010. But at least for a nomination, I thought Leonardo definitely deserved one.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear. I kind of am surprised by that as well.
And I think that might be because of the release date.
What was the release date?
It was planned to be released on October 2nd, 2009 to be in contention for that year's Oscars. So for our audience, most Oscar bait or movies that want to be nominated for Oscars need to come out at the end of the year because the Oscars happen in February. And so it needs to be fresh in people's mind. That's why a lot of Christmas releases are either artsy films or films that probably have Oscar aspirations attached. So October 2nd, right in that timeline, it could have been in contention, but Paramount Pictures pushed the movie to February 19th, 2010 due to financing problems, which is such bullshit. And so being released in February of 2010, the Academy is not going to remember that movie the following year for Oscar season. So I think that's another reason why it didn't get any.
Wow. I wonder
Which
also...
is a bummer.
Yeah, that is a bummer. It literally came out like 2 weeks before that year's Oscars.
Exactly. Yeah.
Damn.
And last piece of trivia I want to share with you. As of 2022, this is the last Martin Scorsese movie to be shot entirely on film.
Oh, wow. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. So he went digital after this.
He went digital after that, exactly.
For being such a film preservationist, that's a bit shocking to hear, to be honest with you.
I know, I agree. But, Wolf of Wall Street, I could see why that specifically was shot digitally because of everything that's going on in that movie.
Right.
But yeah, still a bummer. So that's Shutter Island. Great movie that still holds up 12 years later. I really enjoy this film. And you can watch it for free if you have an Epix Now or Paramount Plus subscription. Also, if you have an Amazon Prime subscription. So go ahead and check out that movie.
Definitely. I watched it on Paramount Plus, and I actually have a cool little story I'd like to share with you about Shutter Island. Several years ago, after I had graduated from private art school in Manhattan in 2005, I was back in Manhattan in several years after that. I honestly cannot remember the exact year that I was there, but I was in Manhattan for an interview to be an instructor at the New York Film Academy, and this school that I went to is called Manhattan Edit Workshop, and they bring in a lot of editors, sound editors, writers, sometimes directors of, certain, not like the biggest movies in the world, but movies that have been on TV and maybe had a theatrical release. There was a sound editors event that the school had sent an email about to all ex-alumni, and it was a 2.5-hour seminar. And it was the one of the guys that did ADR and one of the sound editors of Shutter Island. So they brought in several scenes from Shutter Island. They showed it to us raw. They showed it to us early edits. They showed it to us completed. And it was pretty fucking fascinating because the scenes that they used were mostly the storm scenes. And it was quite awesome, like listening to them break down how they got all the drops of rain and all the wind and all the thunder and all the clashing of everything around them, all precise before they sent it to Scorsese. And I have a photo of it somewhere. I'll have to find it for you. I'm pretty sure it's on my Facebook page, and I'll have to send it to you and maybe share it on our social media too for people that might be interested.
Yes, please. That is awesome. I love sound editing as well as the way a movie is shot versus the way it looks and sounds completed can sometimes be worlds different. And I love that about movie making.
Yes.
Now comes the point in our show where I hand the mic over to my co-host to discuss his pick. John, do you want to take it away?
I'm very excited to get into mine. This film turned me into a fan of one of the main actors that is in this movie. I wrote this actor off for a very long time until I saw this movie. This movie is from 2019. It is written by Robert Eggers and Max Eggers. They are brothers, directed by Robert Eggers. This is Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson in The Lighthouse. Oh. If anybody's seen The Lighthouse, I imagine there's been a whole bunch of eye rolls just now, unless you are a fan of the movie like myself, and it sounds like V might be a new fan of The Lighthouse.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
It is an acquired taste film, no doubt about it. Robert Eggers, as we have discussed in the past, he came onto the scene with a film with Anya Taylor-Joy called The Witch, which I think is actually a fantastic horror film. It's very short, but it's to the point, and the last 20 minutes make my blood run cold. It is very, very scary. And then he also just very recently came out with the Viking film The Northman, which I absolutely loved. The Lighthouse, very simple story. You really don't need to go too much into it. It is about two men, old and young, as we are really kind of only given at the beginning. We are not given any names. Willem Dafoe is old. Robert Pattinson is young. They are two men that are put on an island with a lighthouse. They are there for 4 weeks. They are to tend the light and to tend the island and to just keep up their duties for the next round robin that's coming in after them in 4 weeks. That's the story. There it is. Congratulations, you now know what The Lighthouse is about. The Lighthouse also is a very fantastically written film. It is really meticulously written. The dialogue is from the time. This is set in the 1890s. So this is based off of a true story that Robert Eggers actually found in his research while coming up with the idea for The Lighthouse. It's based on a real-life tragedy from 1801. It was called the Smalls Lighthouse Tragedy. Both men were named Thomas, and one of them died, which is said to have driven the other man completely insane. And I can only imagine what that's like if you're the only other person on an island and your partner ends up dying. What the hell who are you gonna talk to? Mm-hmm. Anything like that. Coincidentally enough, both of the characters in this film we later find out are both named Thomas. One is Tommy, one is Thomas. Thomas is played by Willem Dafoe. Tommy is Robert Pattinson. The film is very rough to watch, and only because of the fact that it is shot on 35mm double X stock film, and it is shot in a specific aspect ratio of 1:19:1. So that is almost a perfectly square frame. Mm-hmm. And the reason for this was because Robert Eggers did not want to go widescreen, because widescreen film had not come about until the early to mid 1950s. So Robert Eggers wanted to bring us into the times, which I think he did fucking fantastically. You are claustrophobic as hell watching this movie because everything is so close together, except for when they're out on the island. Well, not they. We're really only following Robert Pattinson around most of the time. And when shooting this movie, since the film is 35mm and black and white, and they were shooting in a certain aspect ratio and using certain lenses from back in the early 1930s, they had to light this thing with massive wattage.
Really?
And a lot of the lights that were actually used were replaced lights that were originally in old kerosene lamps. So a lot of the scenes that are close-up shots of Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, they can't see each other because it's so fucking bright wherever they are being shot. And most of the crew was wearing sunglasses day and night because of how bright all of the lights were on this island.
Damn.
I know, isn't that nuts? Like, can you imagine, like, it's 4 o'clock in the morning and it's pitch black out and you have sunglasses on because the lights that you're using for lighting a movie are, like, brighter than the sun to your perception anyway?
It reminds me of that shoot we were both on in Malibu Canyon. And remember, we were lighting that house and it was bright as shit. And that, that neighbor lady came over and, like, hightailed it over to the set in her car and almost hit one of the actors. And we're like, what the fuck, lady? And she's like, those lights are always shining on my house. And we're like, okay, Karen, you could have, like, asked us to turn them down or move them. Like, you almost hit somebody because you're pissed.
I do remember that. Yeah, and we were across the canyon. Like, this was not like right next door.
No,
this is
not
Malibu Hills. That was wild. I do remember that. Damn.
Yeah, just this,
that was crazy.
Super rich, pissed off lady. Just like, she was mad, but she almost hit Brian Krause, the actor, with her car, and we were like, oh my god.
I'm so glad she didn't. I would have had so much paperwork to do that.
That's right, because you were like an AD on that, weren't you?
I was the second AD, and I was a couple other things. I was production coordinator. It was one of those movies where I wore like 9 hats. But Brian Krause, if anybody remembers him from Charmed, very good dude. I have worked with him on several movies, as did Vee. And I actually ran into him several times at Griffith Park, and he would always be like, hey, Clemson! I'm like, hey, Krause! Nice. Yeah, really, really good dude. I always liked working with him whenever he would show up on the cast list. Very good dude. But yeah, and again, I'm glad he did not get hit.
Yeah.
But good memory. I had not thought about that until you just brought it up. So yeah, lighting a movie at night can be a real pain in the ass. Not for the crew, but for the surrounding assholes that also have been given, the, what is it, Film LA notice, like filming is taking place at night. There's going to be bright lights.
But that's awesome. I'm so stoked that I actually remembered something before you did, because you have the perfect memory and I certainly do not. So I'm stoked about that. And yes, I always had a crush on Brian Krause growing up because he was Leo Piper's husband in Charmed, which is a show I liked in high school. And so working with him a couple times was really fun just to get to know him as a person. And yeah, he's a cool guy.
Indeed, he is. So with the aspect ratio and the way the film was lit, that really came based off of the lenses that they were using. They were using Baltar vintage lenses from 1918 up until 1938 to shoot this movie. So these lenses were, in the proper sense, vintage as fuck. And I thought that was pretty awesome. And it's one thing that impresses me about Robert Eggers ever since The Witch is his meticulous planning. Almost kind of like how Toni Collette raves about Ari Aster being the most prepared director she's ever worked with. I wonder what she would say about Robert Eggers, because I have watched all of his behind the scenes of all 3 of his movies that he's made, and I just... It's pure pleasure watching this guy fucking work. And he's around our age, and he's kind of one of those directors that I wished I always could have been, just like meticulous and writing a script that is engaging. And the script for The Lighthouse is based very, very loosely off of a lot of journals that Max Eggers and Robert Eggers read from the early to late 1800s from sailors and farmers. So all the dialogue in this film is really ripped from those and from different poems that they were able to find from this young lady named Sarah Orne Jewett. She did a lot of interviews with old sailors and farmers back in the 1800s too, and she wrote poems based off of that. So that's where the script comes from. And the accents, 2 of my favorite parts about the acting in this movie is both these guys, Willem Dafoe, Robert Pattinson, all their facial hair is real. None of that is makeup. Very impressive that Willem Dafoe can grow like that. Grow
his beard like is that. Awesome, yeah.
It's so awesome. He wore caps on his teeth to make his teeth look a little bit more worn down than Robert Pattinson's. Robert Pattinson's accent is based off of a very specific Maine farming dialect. And Defoe's is based off of Atlantic fishermen. And Robert Eggers was very precise about their delivery. So there would be certain times where they would do a take, and then Robert Eggers would yell, cut. He'd go up to Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, he'd direct them separately, which I thought was perfect. It wasn't like a combined direction. And he would tell them both to deliver their lines a certain percentage faster, a certain percentage slower. But one thing I like about Robert Eggers is he doesn't tell them how to say it. And I know there's a lot of directors that like, why don't you just say it like this? And that irritates the hell out of me. It's like, then why don't you just fucking act? You know, it's like there's a reason you have these actors, because you like their performances in other movies, and or you just respect them and you've always wanted to work with them. And Robert Eggers actually really had these two guys on a silver platter sent to him, because both of them reached out to Robert Eggers after they watched The Witch and were like, I need to be in your next fucking movie.
Really?
Yeah. The Witch is a major impressive horror film, and it's not like super fucking terrifying. It's not a lot of stuff that pops out at you. You could probably watch it on your own, Vee, but it's still... There are times in that movie, Amy's never watched it with me because she walked by one time when I was watching it for the first time, and what she saw was something that she wished she had never seen. No. And I wish I could kind of get it out of my memory too, but it really moves the story forward, if that makes any sense.
I'm most impressed learning about him being around the same age as us, because these movies seem like they come from a very experienced, mature, seasoned director.
Absolutely.
In a lot of ways that I would think he was in his 50s. And then I saw a picture of him. I'm like, what the hell? He's 36?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I know. It's impressive. And, I like when that happens because, like you said, you would anticipate like the guy looking like Larry Charles with some, Martin Scorsese, like a massive beard and just like run down and rugged. But no, the guy's like a good looking dude. He's got a good mind for cinema, and I really like that. And again, going back to the dialogue, I mean, most of the monologues are just fan-fucking-tastic. There's no words of dialogue spoken for the first 7.5 minutes of this movie, which really is impressive to me, because one of the other films that I really love is There Will Be Blood. And that movie does not have a shred of dialogue until the almost minute 16. And it's just engaging to see what is going on screen with Daniel Plainview. And now in The Lighthouse, movie opens up very similarly to Shutter Island. They are both on a boat. They're going to this lighthouse. They get on shore. They watch the boat disappear into the fog, and then they get to business. And business just is shitty. It's not good. It's not anything that anybody really should be doing.
Backbreaking work.
Horribly backbreaking work. And Tommy... young, I guess I should just say old and young, because they're both named Thomas in the movie. And we only find this out about an hour plus into the film, when they actually start to build a little bit of a rapport and kind of decide that, chit-chat is important so they don't get bored and they don't go crazy.
Irony.
Exactly, yeah. And at one point, Young asks Old about what happened to his old partner, his predecessor. And Old says, went mad he did. Started talking about merfolk and thinking there was enchantment in the light. And he just kind of went crazy. And that's kind of where he leaves it. And then, later on, we're getting all this dialogue about it's bad luck to kill a seabird, it's a bad omen, this, that, and the other. And Young is just like, why is that? He goes, gulls are the souls of old sailors that have perished, And in a strange way, I always used to think that seagulls were actually people that have died that are just stuck in purgatory, because you
they're
can't,
assholes.
They're assholes. They get scraps of food. They're still alive. They can fly, which is just about every human being's wish. If they had a superpower, is they could fucking fly. So now you die. You're a seagull. You're on the beach all the time. You're eating the scraps and you're flying. So it's not good. It's not bad. You're just kind of in the middle, kind of basically like purgatory.
Yeah.
So I always thought that was pretty interesting about the dialogue that they exchange very early on into the movie. And then things just start to get weird. Things just...
The understatement of the year. Jesus Christ.
Things just start to get weird in The Lighthouse. And it's very interesting to read about how this film was made, not only because of the cameras and lenses and film stock that they used, but this was shot off of the coast of Nova Scotia on an actual island. The lighthouse was constructed for the movie. It was built to withstand 120-kilometer wind. I don't know what 120 kilometer is in miles an hour, but it was built to withstand
80 or 90, I think.
Maybe, yeah. So pretty fast fucking winds. And everything is practically built. There were a few sets that were constructed on a Nova Scotia soundstage, some of it being the interior of the cabin that they're staying in. Majority of it, though, was shot on the island. All of the weather is real. None of that is for the movie. They dealt with massive thunderstorms ice cold rain, the Atlantic right there in front of him crashing up against the rocks. All of that weather is natural. None of it is made for the film. And it wore these two actors out so much based off of the incredibly intense working conditions that they never hung out on set. They didn't actually have a conversation with each other about how the movie making went for them until months after production wrapped. They did do a week of rehearsals in a hotel room, which Robert Pattinson was very elusive about because his method at acting is he likes to do it on the fly. Mm-hmm. He likes to have the camera there, and he likes to give the performance in 1 or 2 takes, which he did do majority of the production of The Lighthouse, whereas Willem Dafoe comes from a theatrical background and Broadway and stuff, and he likes to rehearse. He likes to really sink his teeth into his character. And I thought both of those reasonings were very valid reasons. And I got to tell you, like I said, this movie has turned me into a Robert Pattinson fan. When this movie ended the first time, I actually gave it a round of applause, and I don't do that often at home, but I really did clap at the end of this movie, mainly for Robert Pattinson. We've seen Willem Dafoe. We've seen him for decades. He's a great fucking actor. Mm-hmm. Robert Pattinson fucking killed this movie.
He did. He's a great actor.
He was so fucking good. There's moments in this movie that he made me hysterically laugh. There are moments in this movie where I am like curling up in a ball because I'm just terrified of what he's going to do next. The one moment that I realized that this was an actor was after he starts talking about how he's broken the curse of old and he starts clapping and laughing. Yeah. Like that hysterical, just like, I got it, I'm over it. That whole thing just was like, okay, I buy this now. Mm-hmm. Like I was buying it from the beginning. I really was. You can't not buy this movie. It's one of those, you believe it immediately. It's in the faces of these guys. It's in the production. It's in the surroundings. Like this is a true cinema lover's movie. Mm-hmm. And Robert Pattinson, I could not believe how good he was in this movie. So the unfortunate reality was I saw Good Time, and I didn't like Good Time. I didn't think it was that great of a movie. And that's the Safdie brothers who did Uncut Gems. I didn't think Good Time was great, so I, again, was like, not really going to do a Robert Pattinson movie. There was another movie that came out with him called High Life. It was a space drama. Almost went to see it in theaters, but when I read what it was R-rated for and saw that there was rape and sexual assault, I decided against seeing it. Mm-hmm. I might watch it now because I love me some Robert Pattinson. But it also saved me from being upset about Tenet when Christopher Nolan's Tenet came out because Robert Pattinson was cast. And man, does he kill it in that movie too. Mm-hmm. And the cool thing about Robert Pattinson is every time he plays a different character, he chooses a different dialect to play that character in. So beyond The Lighthouse, where he was kind of instructed to be this old Maine, accent and old farmer, in Tenet, he does something with his accent that is like a combination of 2 different British and Scottish accents or something like that. I can't exactly remember what it is. Just very impressive, very clean cut. Even though he's dirty as hell in The Lighthouse, majority of the time he's very rarely ever clean. He just really conveys a lot of power on screen, and I really, really respected that in The Lighthouse.
I agree, and I actually have a longer history with Robert Pattinson because I first noticed him in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire because he plays Cedric Diggory, and that's one of his first ever roles.
That's right, yeah.
I did watch all the Twilight movies. I am the right age for that. And now that he's an adult and has gotten an opportunity to show his acting chops and range, you look back at Twilight and go, God damn, he was wasted in that movie.
Oh, sure, for sure. But, he needed a paycheck. He was the young heartthrob,
yeah.
I completely understand why he did it. But you're right. The first time I saw him was Goblet of Fire. That was the first Harry Potter film I ever saw. I actually went to see that in the theaters with my parents, and I just went on a whim because I was like, fuck it, I've never seen these movies, I'll check it out. And at the time, I didn't put any of that together, that he was that character. And then after watching The Lighthouse, when it first came out on Amazon, my wife and I do the Harry Potter all the way through, like once a year around like Halloween and Christmas. And my wife is a major Harry Potter fan. So when we were watching Goblet of Fire again and I saw him, I was like, oh, sweet. Yeah. All right, awesome. And I liked him in that movie too. So, it really takes one to actually fall in love with an actor or an actress. Mm-hmm. And this is the one. Like, I am very vocal about how much I love Robert Pattinson because of The Lighthouse and because of Tenet. He just really, again, I'll continue to say it. He's fucking fantastic. And very interestingly enough, while they were shooting this movie, after they were wrapped on days, Defoe was staying in an old fisherman's cottage, very far away from the crew in the hotel that they were staying in Nova Scotia. And Robert Pattinson was hanging out with the crew and drinking with them and, kind of hanging out and getting to know them after production days were over. During production, Willem Dafoe was the one hanging out with the crew, and Robert Pattinson was the one off in the corner not interacting with anybody. So I liked that dynamic too. It's like Willem Dafoe wants his privacy at night, Robert Pattinson wants his privacy on set. That was just interesting to me. I thought that was very cool.
Yeah, and I think that really contributes to the dynamic of these two men on screen as well. Similar to a couple episodes ago talking about Dreamgirls and how the director told Jennifer Hudson, like, don't show up for some of these rehearsals,
right.
Show up late, etc. And that really contributed to a very natural, even subconscious dynamic that is built out that transfers for these characters really nicely on screen. So I think that's cool, and I think that definitely helped.
Oh, absolutely. And Robert Pattinson had some very interesting techniques on how to get ready for certain scenes.
He's method.
Reading this and watching the making of again, I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
There were moments as cameras were rolling that Robert Pattinson decided to continuously punch himself in the face as hard as he could. There were other times where he would choke himself before the cameras rolled. There were several other times where he would try and make himself throw up and he would gag. And that was how he really got into his character. And I don't think I ever would do something like that, but I think it's very fascinating because they're on this fucking island, and every time Pattinson's on screen, he's either wet or looking like he just got kicked the shit out of him.
Yes,
he very clearly kicked the shit out of himself to shoot this movie and shoot these scenes. Very, very fascinating. I can only imagine what Willem Dafoe was thinking as he was punching himself over in the corner. But at one point, Willem Dafoe, there's the one scene after they decide to drink 2 bottles together and they get real shit-faced where they're kind of cuddling. And Willem Dafoe started yelling at Eggers because Robert Pattinson was gagging himself. And he goes, if Robert throws up on me, I'm out. If Robert throws up on me, I'm out. And to this day, I don't think anybody knows if Robert ever did throw up on Willem, but maybe he did. I don't know.
No, he stayed, so he didn't.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. There were no seagulls harmed in the making of this film.
Oh, that's good to know.
I figure, yeah.
Oh my God.
That is one brutal scene.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first time I saw it, I was just like, holy shit.
Yeah.
you
also
think it's
comes
over
out of
and just
nowhere.
keeps going. Yeah. I mean, that seagull's been taunting him for quite some time, but at the same time, you're just kind of like, holy God, man. Really?
Yeah.
That's where you decided to go with that, huh? 35 days of principal photography. They were at Cape Fortune, which is the island off of Halifax, Nova Scotia, up in Canada. The opening shot used a Potzuol lens, which was originally designed in 1840. And I have always loved the opening shot of the Lighthouse. It feels like a painting coming to life to me. And the soundtrack to the Lighthouse, I have listened to it endless amounts of times. And it is an eerie, brooding, dark soundtrack. But I love it. The composer, Mark Corvin, did The Witch as well, so they worked together again right after The Witch to do The Lighthouse. I love this movie. I really don't want to give anything else away because it's one of those movies that it's an experience. It's an experience film. You got to watch it if you ever want to. I will say that it is an acquired taste film. It's not going to be a movie that everybody's going to like. It's not going to be a movie that everybody's even going to want to watch again. But I have seen this movie 9 or 10 different times, and every time I watch it, I catch something new. And there's a lot of interesting Greek mythology thrown around in this movie, too. And that's one thing I'm not going to give away about exactly what. But there was one thing that I wanted to mention to you about. There is the dream sequence where Young is hallucinating about his previous life. And that is referencing a 1904 painting called Hypnosis by a German artist named Sascha Schneider. And it's a very poignant moment in the film because it gives the audience the idea that something truly is really wrong here. And we just don't know what it is. And I still don't know what it is. But, even when this movie ends, you're just kind of like, you need a palate cleanser when it's done. You need to take a deep breath. You got to walk around a minute, maybe have a drink of water. because of the intense weather conditions, you really do kind of feel like you're there with them. And that's the other reason why I like this movie, is because you really do feel like you're walking on this island with these guys.
I felt much more like an observer, and I think that had to do with the aspect ratio. I also think that had to do with the fact that this movie is in black and white.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I love that it's in black and white.
I do too, and I love seeing the behind-the-scenes pictures of the two actors in these very, very bright clothes that look.
Oh yeah,
like Robert Pattinson looked like Super Mario.
So fucking funny.
That hat and overalls.
Oh yeah,
but
I love that picture.
Yeah, but as a lot of us know, with black and white film, you have to wear very, very bright clothes and different colors in order for black and white to pick up different tones of basically gray that it shows you. And there is not one moment of this film where you have any idea what the fuck is going on.
Oh, not at all. No. Actually, I would say the first 7 minutes and the first dinner, you know kind of what's going on. But then after that, that's when things get even more strange.
And you're right. It is absolutely an experience. This is for someone who has more expansive taste than either popcorn movies or straightforward movies or movies with a specific beginning, middle, and end, or a plot, or
yeah, there's really not
satisfaction.
a big plot going on in this movie. Not really.
So for me, I'd never seen it before, and I appreciate the audacity that Eggers has. I appreciate him as an auteur. He is a phenomenal filmmaker. Of the 3 movies that he's come out with so far, mad respect for him. I didn't hate this movie, but I did not enjoy it either. And I think a good comparison for me personally is The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh, sure.
It's a great movie.
Yeah.
For different, and of course, The Revenant and The Lighthouse are great movies for very different reasons. They're both great movies. I was uncomfortable the entire time watching both movies. I will not watch either of these movies again.
Oh, wow.
But I am glad I saw them.
Sure.
Especially because The Lighthouse is so far beyond anything else I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
It is so different.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that aspect of it of like, oh, okay, I'm really expanding my experience here and my, film knowledge and what constitutes a movie. And it was fascinating how this movie was put together, how it was produced, how it was presented. Everything about this movie is fascinating in a lot of ways, and it all felt very, very real, very, very raw. I mean, you really are just as sore as Robert Pattinson is doing this backbreaking work like lugging coal.
Oh, yeah.
And at the same time, you recognize that this is a movie with an unreliable narrator.
Yes.
This is an incoherent, unpredictable movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no way you can predict what's going on or what's going to happen.
No. And so it's fascinating from an artistic standpoint, and that's where I can respect this movie and like this movie, but I did not enjoy it. I'm like, oh, God, this is not my type of film.
Yeah. Did you take a shower after?
I ate some chocolate and then put on a cartoon.
Yeah, there you go. That's interesting that you say that too. It's going back to the dialogue and the setting of the time. One of my favorite moments in this movie is when Old asks Young what business he has being a wickie. And wickie is a lighthouse keeper, taking care of the light and et cetera, et cetera. And Young starts talking to him about how he's done just about every job a man can do at this point in time in history. And he goes, this job just sounded a little bit better. Maybe I could make, I don't know, like $630, maybe $1,000 a year. It's like, whoa, $630 to $1,000 a year? 1890? Wow, $1,000 a year. You think about that, like, what could you get with $1,000 a year? So it goes back, I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking all of a sudden I'm thinking about Hamilton, set in the late 1770s, right? They have the Schuyler sisters are rich and well off. It's like, how much money did they have?
Right, it was like 10 grand.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe even $5 grand,
Yeah.
$2,000 a year can give you all this lavish life. It was so fascinating to me. And $
1,000 a year in today's money is a little over $32,000.
Wow. Okay, so I make $1,000 a year right now in 1890. If we were to go right back in time, I would be pulling in that kind of cash. Damn, man. But at least I don't have to break my back doing it.
Oh God.
Or hallucinate about mermaids or merfolk.
Yes.
Which some of those, I gotta say, some of those hallucinations are quite disturbing.
They
and
are.
The thing about The Lighthouse is, like V said, she didn't hate it. She didn't necessarily enjoy it. And I love the movie. I think it's fucking fantastic. However, there are moments where, and even after having seen it a handful of times, I'm just like, oh man, this is really fucking twisted. Like,
Yeah.
there is some weird shit going on in this fucking movie. And then I start thinking, you know, I'm in the middle of a book that I got at a bookstore years ago, and it's called 20 Years Before the Mast. And it is a journal of a young man that went around the globe on a frigate boat. And it is a fascinating book, and I really, really like it. And I'm a very big fan of nautical stuff. I love frigate stuff and British warships and all that kind of stuff. So thinking about the dialogue and reading that book, it really just, there's so much more joy in it for me. And as Willem Dafoe said, when he first read the script for The Lighthouse, it was pure pleasure. And it really was for me too, watching this movie, because again, Robert Eggers and his brother sunk their teeth into the proper dialect. And right at the end of the movie, there's a little snippet that says dialogue taken from journals, you know, and inspired by. And it's just like that alone deserves a round of applause, because there's so much meticulous research that went into The Lighthouse to make it authentic and accurate. And I really like that. And the budget of The Lighthouse was $11 million, which is pretty nuts for a movie like this. But you think, you know, The Lighthouse was constructed. They had to rent an island off the coast of Nova Scotia. Overall, worldwide, it pulled in $18.3 million. So it did pretty well. And domestically, it pulled in $10.8 million. And it was released on October 18th of 2019. A24 released it, who we've discussed as a studio before. The Lighthouse most definitely fell off the radar, because you want to know what else was released on October 18th of 2019?
Yes.
Okay. Jojo Rabbit, Oscar nominated. Maleficent 2, Mistress of Evil, came out same day, which was pretty fun for a sequel. I don't like Angelina Jolie, but I do like her as Maleficent. And then Zombieland 2, Double Tap, came out on the same day. And just a few weeks before that, Joker came out. So The Lighthouse had a lot of competition in the month of October. And at the same time, I understand, though, as I'm sure you can also, V, as to why The Lighthouse did not garner a whole lot of press and, you know, positive reviews. So it was interesting. And the highest grossing film, I wonder if you might be able to know it, of 2019. We just discussed it. Or maybe I did in a Twitter post.
I was going to say, it's Endgame, right?
Yes, it was Endgame. 'Twas Endgame.
But I do want to follow up with a question for you when you say that it didn't garner many positive reviews. I've only heard fantastic things about this movie.
As have I. That's the interesting thing, is anybody I've ever talked to, I introduced a few friends of mine to it. I was like, you guys got to check out The Lighthouse. It's fucking awesome. And they'll send me a text or give me a call, and I'm like, yeah, that was really good. But I can see this movie as not obviously for everybody.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, it's a weird fucking movie, but
it
is a fantastic piece of art. And so in that way, I would think a ton of critics would be huge fans of this movie and be like, oh, this is, you know, really audacious of a new director coming on and doing a type of movie like this. And so I've only ever heard great things about this movie, but it is not a mainstream movie in any sense of the word.
Right, yeah. And that's, I just know that, like you said, it's not a mainstream type of movie.
No.
And based off of what came out, you know, around the same time, there were a lot more movies that people were like, oh, let's take the family to this one.
Oh, yeah, totally understandable. I mean,
this is not a movie for anybody under the age of
Joker,
18, I would think.
Yeah, because Joker's less disturbing than this movie, let's put it that way.
Oh, most definitely, yeah. As disturbing as Joker is, let's not get that sugar-coated
yeah, that's my
at all.
point. No, and that's
but
my point.
No, that's actually a great point. Joker is disturbing. This one takes the cake.
By miles. By nautical miles.
By nautical miles, yes. It is now also on the 1001 Movies to See Before You Die list, which I think is great. And I'm wondering, oh, well, you probably don't know this, but number 2 of 2019 was the unfortunate computer animated remake, not live action remake, of The Lion King. We also have, the 10th spot for highest grossing movie of 2019 was It Chapter 2, which I went to see opening weekend and I thought was pretty damn good. Number 25 was Godzilla King of the Monsters, which I thought was also a lot of fucking fun. Number 32 was one of your picks very recently.
Rocket Man.
There you go, Rocket Man, yes. Number 37, now we're going to go into a couple of the horror movies that were on the top 100 of 2019. Number 37 was Annabelle Comes Home, which I have not seen any of the Annabelle movies. I need to because I love The Conjuring, and The Conjuring opens up with the Annabelle doll. Then we have number 52 was The Curse of La Llorona, which was actually very scary. Then number 71 was the creature feature Crawl, directed by Alexander Aja, which is a lot of fun. It's not super scary, but it's a very entertaining movie. Number 87 is a movie that I think you should watch when you're not alone, Midsummer.
Ooh,
and the Midsummer
Ari
trailer
Aster.
was on the... Yep, Ari Aster. The Midsummer trailer was on the Blu-ray of The Lighthouse. And number 129 of 2019, The Lighthouse.
Nice. Okay, not too bad.
Top the 150. Yeah, top 150, which is pretty good considering, like I said, it made 18.3 worldwide and 10.8 million domestically here in the U.S. So it did do fairly well box office-wise. I'm sure everybody was very happy, including Robert Eggers, because, again, his 3 films have so far been have been home runs, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I love The Witch, I love this movie, and I really, really love The Northman. I can't say enough good things about The Lighthouse and Robert Eggers and Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe. And we only really talked a little bit about, well, a lot about Robert Pattinson, but those that don't know who Willem Dafoe is, he is in The Masterpiece. And I'm going to say this again. He's in The Masterpiece, Speed 2 Cruise Control. He is also in...
Oh my God.
It is far from a masterpiece. He's also, we have him as Norman Osborn in Spider-Man, who I think he was one of the best villains in the Spider-Man series of movies. Mm-hmm. We also know Willem Dafoe from Boondock Saints. I know a lot of people are big fans of Boondock Saints. And just a plethora of other movies that Willem Dafoe has been in. A funny story about Willem Dafoe is my grandmother met him, my father's mother met him very, very briefly. She was walking by, and she didn't know if it was him or not, so she asked him if he was who he was, and he said no at first. But then he came back and was like, no, yes, I am Willem Dafoe, and she was very, very excited about that.
That's cute.
So, yeah. And again, the guy's been in so many movies, you know, and majority of the time he's good. He's in John Wick. I mean, we can't forget that. I loved him in John Wick. He's a voice actor in Fantastic Mr. Fox. He's been in a couple of Wes Anderson movies. He was in one of the most horrific films I've ever seen in my life, directed by Lars von Trier, starring Charlotte Gainsbourg, called Antichrist. Do not ever watch that movie. I'm not even going to no. Don't ever watch it. That is absolutely one I wish I'd never seen, and I was far too high when I watched that movie. And Willem Dafoe again. He was in Inside Man, which we discussed, and he's also in The Aviator very briefly. So he's got a full filmography over the last 30 years, but this might be one of my most favorites of his because it's so off the chain. And that was another reason why Robert Pattinson took this movie, was not only because he also really liked The Witch. Robert Pattinson wanted to get away from the popcorn movies. He wanted to get away from some family-friendly stuff and do some really fucking weird movies. And here we are.
Yes, and here we are, because that certainly fits the bill.
And I think a lot of people might recognize Willem Dafoe's voice from Finding Nemo as Gil. He calls Nemo shark bait in the tank at the dentist. Shark bait! Ooh-ah.
Love him in that movie.
Yeah, good stuff. So yeah, that is The Lighthouse. That's my pick for week 2 of October, going into horror and thrillers. And this is a lot of, the cosmic horror based off of H.P. Lovecraft and kind of stuff like that, hallucinations and whatnot. Not jump at you scary.
No.
Yeah, psychological horror, what your mind can do to you. Definitely very, very trippy film. And I'm glad you didn't hate it, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. But, if you never watch it again, at least you've seen it.
Yeah, and I watched it on Showtime.
Oh, there you go. I watched my Blu-ray copy.
And would you watch this movie with your grandma?
I probably would.
Oh my God!
I think Grandma would find it interesting.
No,
I think Grandma would find it interesting. No. Most definitely. Yeah, Grandma, come on, let's watch The Lighthouse. No. I know my grandfather would have liked it.
Oh my God, no. Well, he was
I know
on a
that.
lot of ships and boats, so I get that.
Yes. Yeah. But my grandma's got an open mind. I'd give her like 25
I've
minutes.
got an open mind. This movie was hard for me. What are you talking about?
Oh, yes, indeed. I think next week is going to be a bit on the lighter side, and then our final episode's going to be pretty intense. So I'm excited for that. We kind of have a little bit of like a sugar coating next week.
Yeah, we've got a nice range of creepy horror movies for the month of October. I'm very excited about. I'm glad we expanded horizons of what quote unquote horror stands for.
Mm-hmm.
So,
absolutely. Would you watch Shutter Island with your grandmother?
I would, because my grandmother was a cop, and so I think that she would find that movie interesting.
Oh yeah.
I've watched it with my dad. I've definitely seen it with my sister, Shannon. And I actually even think my mother would find this movie really interesting. She likes creepy movies like this that are more psychological, not slasher movies, not gory movies. Neither of these movies have any gore in them whatsoever, actually.
No, yeah, I was just thinking that. They're both
And-
R-rated for more on the disturbing side of things.
Very psychologically disturbing side. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I actually think my mom would really like this movie because she likes movies like Carrie or The Shining or Rosemary's Baby that is more on the psychological side of things.
Yeah.
Even though in The Shining there's lots of blood and death, but you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
And so yeah, I mean, I would actually watch I would watch Shutter Island with many different people, and I think anybody over the age of like 16 or 17 could watch Shutter Island.
Definitely. Absolutely agree with that. So do we want to give the audience a little heads up as to what we're doing for next week if they want to follow along with us?
Absolutely, please.
We're going to dive into some of the original creature features, and I'm very excited about this because there's a lot of really good creature features out there. I'm going to be doing the 1931 Boris Karloff-led, and if you guys remember Boris Karloff, we discussed him in Arsenic and Old Lace quite a bit. I'm going to be doing Frankenstein, written by Mary Shelley, of course, and directed by James Whale. And Frankenstein is available for stream for free on Tubi if you don't have Peacock or HBO Max, but if you have HBO Max and Peacock, it is available on both those streaming services.
Nice. And I picked my all-time favorite creature feature. I remember my father introducing this film to me, and I've watched it many, many, many times since then, which was back when I was a teenager. This is the 1954 movie The Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's
nice.
Literally in the title that it's a creature feature.
Indeed.
I will be watching my copy of it, and for our listeners, you can watch it on Tubi for free, which with a movie like this, breaks shouldn't be too jarring, so feel free to watch it for free on Tubi. Otherwise, you can rent it for $3.99 from all streaming services.
Yeah, very excited for those. I'm looking forward to that one.
Me too, yes. I love creature features, and again, love that we are doing a good mix of October movies.
Absolutely. So that about wraps us up here at Movies You Missed Podcast, episode 26. Thank you guys very much for joining us. Please do rate, review, subscribe. If you're a new listener, welcome. Hopefully you come back to listen to our sweet, sweet voices. We do have a lot of fun doing this, and I'm very much looking forward to the remainder of this month, especially because in between these, I like to watch some of my more twisted horror films.
Thank you for not putting them on the list.
Of course. Next year is going to be even worse. Just you wait. Just you wait.
Oh, that's a good song.
Yeah, not bad. And as we like to close out Movies You Missed Podcast, film is a form of art. And in all art, all opinions are valid. Except if you think
all the people in Hollywood are a bunch of child-sacrificing devil worshippers.
Well, speak for yourself.
I mean, of all the devil-worshipping meetings I ever went to, we certainly never sacrificed a child.
That's true. I think I sacrificed one child at one of my devil-worshipping meetings.
Oh, I missed that one. Bummer.
You did.
I only sacrificed
everybody
a
was
goat.
asking where V was that night.
Yeah, well, I appreciate being missed.
Good stuff. I agree. Indeed. Nobody, well, not nobody, but especially V and myself are not sacrificial.
No.
Thank you guys very much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.